20 consultants told the CEO to walk away. One single dad told her where they were wrong. What could make one person challenge the advice of 20 experts? Why would a single dad believe he saw something others missed? Hello, everyone. We hope you're having a wonderful day filled with positive energy, happiness, and good luck. Please give us about 5 seconds to share a small kindness with us by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Thank you so much for being here and supporting our stories. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is right now. We truly appreciate your time and support. Now, let us begin the story. 20 experts can agree on the same answer, but one person with the right perspective can still see the truth they missed. The words echoed quietly in the corner of a glass-walled conference room where one of America's most successful CEOs faced the hardest decision of her career. Victoria Caldwell stared at the reports spread across the table. 20 consultants, each with years of experience and impressive backgrounds, had reached the same conclusion. The company's newest project was too risky. The numbers were disappointing. The future looked uncertain. "We should walk away," one consultant said. "Continuing would be a mistake," another added. Victoria had built her reputation by making difficult choices, but this decision felt different. Behind the confident image of a powerful CEO was a leader searching for the right answer. Outside that room, unnoticed by everyone, was Ethan Brooks, a quiet single father who worked in operations. He was not wearing an expensive suit. He did not have a team of assistants. He did not have a title that made people listen. But he had spent weeks studying the same information from a completely different perspective. Ethan was the kind of person most people overlooked. He arrived early, completed his responsibilities, and went home each evening to his daughter Lily. He never tried to impress executives or prove that he was smarter than anyone else. He believed that good work spoke louder than attention. To most people at the company, Ethan was simply another employee. But what they did not know was that he had a rare ability to notice patterns hidden beneath the surface. He understood systems, people, and problems in a way that came from years of experience and careful observation. That afternoon, Ethan passed by the conference room and saw the expressions on the faces of the executives inside. He recognized the look immediately. It was not failure. It was uncertainty. A small detail in the presentation caught his attention. Something about the numbers did not make sense. He looked closer and realized the entire discussion was built around one assumption that nobody had questioned. For several minutes, Ethan stood quietly, wondering if he should say anything. He knew what would happen if he interrupted. People might wonder why someone in his position believed he had something valuable to add. He had seen it many times before. People often listen to titles before they listen to truth. But Ethan also remembered something his father once told him. If you see a problem and have a way to help, silence is not humility. Sometimes speaking up is the right thing to do. Taking a deep breath, Ethan walked toward the conference room door. The conversation inside suddenly stopped as everyone looked at him. Victoria turned with a questioning expression. She knew Ethan as the quiet employee who handled his work without complaints. She never expected him to enter a room filled with experts. "Excuse me," Ethan said calmly. "I know this may not be my place, but I think there is something everyone might have missed." The room became silent. 20 consultants looked toward the single dad standing at the doorway. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. Victoria watched him carefully, unsure of what to expect. Then Ethan placed one document on the table and asked one simple question that changed the entire conversation. Who verified the original assumption behind this conclusion? The conference room remained quiet after Ethan Brooks asked his simple question. For a moment, nobody moved. The 20 consultants who had confidently presented their conclusion looked at the document on the table, wondering what the quiet single father could possibly have noticed that they had missed. Victoria Caldwell studied Ethan carefully. She had seen him many times around the company, but always in the background. He was the person who kept operations running smoothly, the person who solved small problems before they became bigger ones. Yet she had never imagined that he would challenge a room full of experts. "Ethan, what exactly are you suggesting?" Victoria asked. Her voice was calm, but everyone could feel the curiosity behind it. Ethan opened the document and pointed to a section of the analysis. I believe the conclusion is based on information that is accurate, but the interpretation may not be complete. The consultants exchanged uncertain looks. One of them leaned forward and asked, "Are you saying the entire team misunderstood the data?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I am saying the data was viewed from only one direction." That answer surprised everyone. Ethan was not trying to prove them wrong. He was not trying to make himself look intelligent. He was simply explaining what he saw. He carefully walked through the numbers, showing how a small assumption had changed the way everyone viewed the situation. The problem was not the project itself. The problem was that everyone expected the same result, because they were using the same perspective. Victoria listened closely as Ethan explained his reasoning. She noticed something unusual. The more he spoke, the more the room became focused. His confidence did not come from having a louder voice. It came from understanding the details. He did not rush. He did not criticize. He simply shared what he had discovered. After several minutes, one consultant reviewed the information again and quietly admitted that assumption was never tested. The room became even quieter. Victoria looked around the table at the experts who had all reached the same conclusion. Then she looked back at Ethan. For the first time, she saw him differently. He was not just an employee from the operations department. He was someone who could identify a problem because he understood how every small piece connected together. "How did you notice this?" Victoria asked. Ethan paused before answering. "I spent a lot of time watching how things work. When something does not make sense, I try to understand why." It was a simple answer, but it revealed something important about him. Ethan had never been searching for recognition. He had been searching for solutions. The meeting continued for another hour, and the atmosphere slowly changed. The consultants began asking Ethan questions instead of dismissing him. They wanted to understand his perspective. Victoria watched the transformation happen in front of her. A man who had entered the room without a title had gained the attention of people who built their careers on expertise. But Ethan remained exactly the same. When the meeting ended, he quietly collected his papers and prepared to leave. Victoria stopped him before he walked out. "Ethan, I would like to talk with you more about this." He nodded politely. "Of course." As he walked away, Victoria looked back at the documents on the table. 20 consultants had told her to walk away. One single dad had asked a question nobody else thought to ask. And for the first time, Victoria wondered how many valuable voices have been ignored simply because people never expected them to have the answer. The days after Ethan Brooks stepped into that conference room changed the way Victoria Caldwell viewed the people around her. The decision that once seemed impossible was no longer about whether the company should walk away. It became a question of whether everyone had been looking at the problem from the wrong angle. Victoria requested a deeper review of Ethan's analysis, not because she doubted her consultants, but because she had learned something important. The person with the highest position in the room was not always the person with the clearest vision. Ethan returned to his normal responsibilities after the meeting. He did not expect special treatment. He did not tell anyone that he had challenged a group of experts. To him, it was simply a situation where he saw something that needed attention. His focus remained on his work and his daughter Lily, who was waiting for him at home with stories about her school day. That quiet balance was one of the things that made Ethan different. He carried responsibility without needing recognition. Meanwhile, Victoria continued examining the project details with her leadership team. She asked questions that had never been asked before. Why had everyone accepted the original assumption? Why had nobody looked at the situation from another perspective? Slowly, the answers became clear. The consultants were not careless. They were experienced professionals who had followed the information they were given. But Ethan had noticed a connection between different areas of the business that others had overlooked. He understood the system as a whole, not just individual numbers on a report. One afternoon, Victoria invited Ethan to her office. It was the first time they had spoken privately without him being there for a work assignment. "I want to understand how you saw something that 20 experts missed," she said. Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "I did not think I saw more than anyone else," he replied. "I just looked at it differently." Victoria smiled. Most people would not walk into that room and question those consultants. Ethan looked down for a moment. I was not questioning them. I was questioning the assumption. That answer stayed with Victoria. It showed her the difference between confidence and arrogance. Ethan was not trying to replace the experts. He respected their knowledge. He simply believed every conclusion deserved to be examined carefully. Over the following weeks, Ethan continued helping the team refine the project plan. He worked alongside people who once overlooked him. The consultants who had initially doubted him began asking for his opinion. They realized his strength was not just his ability to analyze information. It was his ability to see possibilities others ignored. One evening, Victoria saw Ethan leaving the office while carrying a small folder and a child's drawing tucked inside it. She learned that Lily had created it for him at school. The drawing was simple, but Ethan kept it with pride. That small moment revealed something Victoria had not considered before. Behind the employee who found, the missing answer was a father who valued simple things more than status. Ethan did not measure success by recognition, money, or influence. He measured it by the people he cared about and the difference he could make. Victoria began realizing that the company had not discovered a hidden consultant. It had discovered something much more valuable. It had discovered a person who had been quietly contributing all along. And the more she learned about Ethan Brooks, the more she wondered what other talents were hidden among the people everyone else ignored. Victoria Caldwell had spent years making decisions in rooms filled with experienced executives, industry leaders, and professional advisors. She believed that success came from having access to the best information and the smartest people available. But after meeting Ethan Brooks, she started to question something she had never considered before. Maybe the greatest insights were not always found among people with impressive titles. Maybe they were hidden in the quiet individuals who observed everything without demanding attention. As the project moved forward, Victoria continued working closely with Ethan. She noticed that he approached every challenge differently. He did not begin with assumptions. He began with questions. He listened before offering opinions. He studied details that others often ignored. The more time she spent around him, the more she realized his ability was not something that appeared suddenly. It was something built through years of discipline and careful thinking. One morning, Victoria asked Ethan about his background. She had become curious about the person behind the observations that had changed the direction of the company. "You have a unique way of analyzing problems," she said. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Ethan paused before answering. "From many different experiences," he replied. Victoria noticed he did not provide a simple explanation. He was not trying to impress her with his past. That made her even more curious. Later that week, she discovered more about Ethan's life through a conversation with someone who had known him for years. She learned that before becoming a single father working in operations, Ethan had spent time in environments where attention to detail and teamwork were essential. He had learned how small decisions could create significant results. But what surprised Victoria most was not what Ethan had done before. It was why he chose the life he had now. Ethan had opportunities to pursue positions with more recognition and higher salaries. Instead, he chose a quieter path because he wanted to be present for Lily. He wanted his daughter to grow up with a father who showed up every day, not just someone who was successful on paper. Victoria thought about that for a long time. She had spent years believing achievement was measured by influence and status. Ethan showed her another definition of success. It could also mean being dependable. It could mean keeping promises. It could mean choosing what truly mattered. When Victoria asked Ethan why he never shared more about his abilities, he gave a simple answer. "Because I do not think people should value me because of what I did before. They should value me because of what I do now." Those words stayed with her. She realized Ethan had never hidden because he lacked confidence. He stayed quiet because he did not need approval to know his own worth. Meanwhile, the company continued moving forward because of the new approach Ethan had helped create. Employees began collaborating more effectively. Managers started asking better questions. The entire organization was becoming more thoughtful and adaptable. Victoria watched these changes happen and understood something important. The single dad she once considered ordinary had always carried extraordinary qualities. He was not trying to become someone important. He had already become someone meaningful. And that realization changed the way Victoria saw leadership forever. The success of Ethan Brooks's idea created a new sense of confidence throughout Victoria Caldwell's company, but not everyone was ready to accept the change. While many employees began recognizing the value of his perspective, some leaders still believed experience only came from traditional paths. They trusted consultants, reports, and familiar methods because those are the things that had always guided their decisions. Ethan understood that change was never easy. He did not expect everyone to accept his ideas immediately. Instead, he continued doing what he had always done. He listened, studied, and searched for the best solution. As the company prepared for the next stage of the project, a major decision approached. The leadership team needed to decide whether to invest more resources into the new strategy Ethan had suggested. The opportunity was significant, but the risk was also clear. Several executives expressed concerns. They respected Ethan's observations, but they wondered if someone without a traditional business background should influence such an important decision. Victoria listened carefully to every opinion. Months earlier, she might have agreed without hesitation. But now she understood that confidence and wisdom could come from unexpected places. Before we decide, Victoria said, "I want everyone to explain what we know, not what we assume." The room became quiet. It was the same approach Ethan had used from the beginning. Look deeper. Question carefully. Do not accept an answer simply because it is familiar. As the team reviewed the information again, they discovered more opportunities hidden within the plan. Ethan had not predicted the future. He had simply noticed details that created new possibilities. Victoria realized that was the reason his perspective was so valuable. He did not claim to know everything. He knew how to keep learning. Later that evening, Ethan returned home and helped Lily prepare for an upcoming school event. She asked him about his day and whether people at work finally listened to his ideas. Ethan smiled. Sometimes people need time to understand something new. Lily thought about that and asked, "Were you upset when they did not believe you?" Ethan looked at her and answered, "Everyone deserves a chance to be heard. But we should also remember that other people are learning too." His answer reflected the same patience he showed in every part of his life. The next morning, Victoria made her decision. She approved the next phase of the project and asked Ethan to participate in the planning process. The announcement surprised many people because Ethan had never held a leadership title. But Victoria explained that leadership was not only about authority. It was about responsibility, judgment, and the ability to help others move forward. Ethan accepted the opportunity, but he remained the same person. He did not suddenly seek attention or change the way he treated people. He continued arriving prepared, helping coworkers, and returning home to the life that mattered most to him. Victoria watched him closely and realized something important. The company had not discovered a hidden employee. It had discovered a hidden source of wisdom that had been there all along. Ethan never needed a room full of people to tell him his value. He had always understood that true worth was not measured by a title. It was measured by the positive impact a person leaves behind. The next phase of the project became a defining moment for Victoria Caldwell's company. The decision to move forward was no longer just a business choice. It became a test of whether people were willing to trust a different way of thinking. For years, the company had relied on traditional methods, experienced advisors, and familiar strategies. But now, a quiet single dad from the operations department had introduced a perspective that changed the way everyone looked at problems. Ethan Brooks did not celebrate the attention. He did not act like someone who had defeated a room full of experts. In his mind, the goal was never to prove others wrong. The goal was always to find the right answer. As the team began implementing the new strategy, unexpected results started appearing. Areas that once seemed impossible to improve began showing progress. Small adjustments created meaningful changes. Employees who had once felt unheard started sharing their own ideas because they saw that good suggestions could come from anyone. Victoria noticed the transformation throughout the company. The biggest change was not only in the project itself. It was in the culture. People were becoming more willing to listen, question, and learn from each other. One afternoon, Victoria reviewed the latest reports with Ethan. She looked at the numbers and smiled. "You were right about the assumption," she said. Ethan shook his head gently. The team was not wrong. They were working with the information they had. Victoria appreciated that response. Many people would have used the moment to take credit. Ethan used it to show understanding. That was the difference. The impact of Ethan Brooks's perspective continued spreading throughout Victoria Caldwell's company, but the greatest change was not found in reports or meetings. It was found in the way people began seeing one another. Employees who once believed that only executives and consultants had valuable ideas started realizing that experience could come from many different places. Victoria noticed this shift every day. The company was becoming more open, more thoughtful, and more willing to listen. She knew Ethan had influenced this change without ever asking for recognition. One morning, Victoria invited Ethan to join a discussion about future growth. Several executives were gathered around the table, reviewing plans and possible challenges. Months earlier, Ethan would have been standing outside that room, focused only on his assigned responsibilities. Now, people wanted to hear what he thought. Ethan looked at the information carefully before speaking. "The most important question is not whether the plan looks successful today," he said. "The important question is whether we understand what could affect it tomorrow." Everyone listened closely. His words were simple, but they reflected the way he approached every problem. He did not search for quick answers. He searched for the truth behind the situation. After the meeting, Victoria walked with Ethan through the office. She noticed how employees greeted him, how they asked for his opinion, and how comfortable they felt around him. It was a different reaction from the one he had received months earlier. Back then, people saw a single dad working in operations. Now, they saw someone whose judgment and character had earned their trust. Victoria stopped for a moment and said, "Do you realize how much you have changed this company?" Ethan smiled. "I think the company changed because people were willing to listen." Victoria appreciated that answer because it showed exactly who Ethan was. He never believed he was the reason for success. He believed success came from people working together. That afternoon, Ethan received an invitation to speak at an internal company event about problem solving and teamwork. He was hesitant at first. Public attention had never been something he wanted. But when he thought about the message he could share, he agreed. During the event, Ethan stood in front of employees who once barely noticed him. He did not talk about achievements or personal accomplishments. He talked about curiosity, humility, and the importance of respecting every person's perspective. "Sometimes the person closest to the problem is the person who understands it best," he said. "Never ignore a voice simply because of where it comes from." The audience remained silent for a moment before applauding. Victoria watched from the side and felt proud. Not because Ethan had become recognized, but because the company had learned a lesson that would last far beyond one project. Later that evening, Ethan returned home and found Lily waiting with a drawing she had made. She showed him a picture of him standing beside a group of people. "I drew you helping everyone," she said. Ethan smiled and placed the drawing on the refrigerator. To Lily, he was not an analyst or a person with hidden talent. He was simply her father. And that was exactly how Ethan wanted to be remembered. Victoria eventually understood that the greatest minds are not always searching for attention. Some people quietly carry wisdom, patience, and kindness wherever they go. They do not need to announce their value. Their actions reveal it. And Ethan Brooks had been revealing his all along. As the company entered a new chapter, Victoria Caldwell realized that the greatest transformation was not happening in the business plans or financial reports. It was happening in the hearts and minds of the people inside the organization. For years, many employees believed success belonged only to those with impressive backgrounds, important titles, and years of formal recognition. But Ethan Brooks had shown them something different. He showed them that wisdom could come from experience, observation, and a genuine desire to help others succeed. Victoria often thought about the day Ethan first entered that conference room. At the time, she saw him as someone who did not belong among the experts. Now, she understood that the room needed someone like him. Not because he knew everything, but because he was willing to ask the questions others ignored. One afternoon, Victoria invited Ethan for coffee after work. It was a simple conversation, but she wanted to understand more about the person who had changed her perspective on leadership. I spent years believing the strongest person in the room was the one with the most authority, Victoria said. You showed me that strength can look very different. Ethan listened quietly and smiled. Everyone has something valuable to offer. Sometimes we just have to give them the chance to show it. Victoria reflected on those words. She realized that her biggest mistake had not been trusting the consultants. Their knowledge was valuable. Her mistake had been believing that knowledge only came from certain people. Ethan taught her that respect should come before judgment. Meanwhile, Ethan continued living his life with the same priorities he always had. He worked hard, supported his coworkers, and made time for Lily. His success at the company never changed who he was. He still packed her lunches, attended school events, and listened to every story she wanted to share. One evening, Lily asked him why people at work respected him so much now. Ethan looked at her and answered, "Respect is not something you demand. It is something you build through your actions." Lily smiled because she understood that lesson in the simplest way. Her father was someone who cared about doing what was right, even when nobody was watching. At the company, Victoria continued building a culture based on the lessons she had learned. She encouraged employees to share ideas, regardless of their positions. She reminded managers that every person had a different perspective worth hearing. The change created stronger connections throughout the organization. People felt valued, and they became more willing to contribute. One day, Victoria watched Ethan helping a new employee understand a complicated process. He was patient and encouraging, never making the other person feel inexperienced. In that moment, she understood the true reason Ethan had made such a difference. His intelligence was impressive, but his character was what inspired people. He did not simply solve problems. He helped people become better. Looking back, Victoria knew that the company's greatest discovery was never a strategy or a new idea. It was the realization that extraordinary qualities can exist in ordinary places. Ethan Brooks never walked into the company searching for recognition. He walked in ready to help. And sometimes the people who quietly make the biggest difference are the ones who never ask anyone to notice them. Months passed, and the story of Ethan Brooks became a quiet reminder throughout the company that true value is not always visible at first glance. The project that many believed would fail became one of the company's greatest achievements. Not because one person had all the answers, but because people finally learned how powerful it could be when different perspectives were respected. Victoria Caldwell often reflected on how much had changed since the day 20 consultants reached the same conclusion. She still respected their knowledge and experience, but she also understood that every great organization needed something more than expertise. It needed curiosity, humility, and the courage to listen. Ethan never considered himself the reason behind the company's success. Whenever someone praised him, he always pointed back to the team. Good results happen when people work together, he would say. Everyone brings something important. That attitude was exactly why people trusted him. He never used his abilities to make others feel smaller. He used them to help others grow. Over time, Victoria became one of the strongest supporters of this new way of thinking. She changed the way leaders evaluated ideas and encouraged everyone in the company to speak. With confidence, she wanted every employee to know that their voice mattered. One afternoon, the company held an event to celebrate the team's achievements. Victoria stood in front of the employees and shared the lesson she had learned. The person who changes everything is not always the person we expect, she said. Sometimes the greatest contributions come from people who quietly do their work every day without asking for attention. She looked toward Ethan standing among the employees. He smiled and nodded, uncomfortable with being the center of attention. After the event, Ethan returned home to the simple life he had always valued. Lily was waiting at the door with excitement, ready to tell him about her day. Ethan listened carefully, just as he always did. For him, these moments were the real measure of success. Not the meetings, not the recognition, not the title, just being there for the people who mattered most. Years later, Victoria would still remember the lesson Ethan taught her. Leadership was not about always having the loudest voice in the room. It was about recognizing the voices that deserve to be heard. It was about understanding that talent does not always arrive with a formal introduction or an impressive title. Sometimes it arrives quietly, carrying responsibility, kindness, and a willingness to help. Ethan Brooks never walked into the company trying to become someone important. He simply continued being the person he had always been. A dedicated father, a thoughtful co-worker, a man who believed doing the right thing mattered, even when nobody noticed. And in the end, that was the lesson everyone remembered. The world often looks for greatness in obvious places, but sometimes the most remarkable people are the ones standing quietly in the background, waiting for the right moment to show what they have always carried inside. True wisdom does not need to demand attention. True character does not need to announce itself. It simply leaves a lasting impact on everyone fortunate enough to recognize it.